So this interview is something I did with Nathan Barry last year. Nathan Barry is the founder of Convertkit, which was valued at a mere $200 million. Spotify tried to buy it from him, and he was like, go fuck yourself. I don't think he said that, but he didn't sell it for that price because he knows it's worth even more. We had an awesome conversation. Nathan cries at one point. It's actually a beautiful story. We laugh, we cry, he cries. I was emotional, but, not tearing up. We had an awesome talk about how he built his company, what he does with his money, almost passive income, all sorts of other shit. Very good conversation, awesome interview. Again, video quality, not the best you'll ever see, but it's solid. This was from a paid event that we did, and I thought just give it to the people for free because I'm just a generous ruler. So enjoy the show, and that's just fucking enjoy it, okay? Okay, guys, we're here with Nathan Barry. Nathan Barry is the founder of Convertkit, Paul. Convertkit. Click something. Click kit. Click kit.
We'll switch.
Yeah,
to be a Boise company. It's a requirement,
I mean, if
I didn't get the memo, it's my mistake.
Paul's got some really good ideas. He had the idea for sled pants, which are pants that are also a sled. Well, you shouldn't take credit for those, by the way. So, I mean, if he tells you to switch the name of your entire company,
then do it.
You got to do it. We got Almost
works.
Pants Income is our next business. So you founded Convertkit. You've done a bunch of other stuff. You've got a couple side businesses we're going to talk about. Any preamble? Also, we're neighbors.
We are neighbors.
My other house is actually basically
so fancy. My other house,
my second home.
Just a real estate mogul. Over
yes,
here.
Well, I buy lots of properties. I don't know. I don't know how to actually say that without being a douchebag. It's really hard. My second home.
Or mountain house.
My mountain house. Yeah. So my mountain house is in the same neighborhood as Nathan, where you grew up. Yep. And this is not like there's a lot of people in this neighborhood. How many houses are there? Maybe 50?
Oh, there's probably 200 or 300.
Is that in Wilderness Ranch?
In Wilderness Ranch.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Never mind.
So it's about 45 minutes outside of Boise.
But still, there's 300 homes in the world there, and we both have one. And I was like, really? And now you're going to set for the rest of this 45 minutes to an hour or so, you're going to sell me on Convertkit so that I can switch. Become your biggest affiliate.
Oh man, but it is very random because we got breakfast a few weeks ago, and you're like, yeah, and I have a house in Wilderness Ranch. I'm like, do you know that's where I grew up?
I didn't. Yeah, no, I literally grew up there.
Yeah. Yep. So I lived there for first 16 years of my life.
Yeah. So that's like growing up, for people to have some reference. It's like growing up it's not necessarily the middle of nowhere, but it's 30 minutes from town, 35 minutes from town.
Yep.
But there's no it's dirt roads out to
miles up a dirt road.
Yeah.
Put chains on in the winter.
Yeah.
All of that. It's a good spot to live.
And you liked growing up there.
Oh yeah. I mean, we played paintball with our friends in the backyard. Like my family had 2 acres, but it backed up to 1,000 acres of the common area.
Do you want to have an airsoft battle?
Sure, let's go. So this is forget the podcast. We're actually going to go have an airsoft battle.
Is that Russell still here? Right, Russell, you want to have an airsoft fight? So we're actually. This is how we're going to start this one. So I'm buying the 13 acres next to the other house, and the first video, like I said, I'm thinking in like YouTube titles now. Is I'm gonna do. I bought a battlefield and reenacted a war. So I want to go to. I've got the whole thing storyboarded. It opens up. That's the Mr. Beast opening line. I bought a battlefield for $750,000, and now I'm going to have a war. And then, boom, you cut. We're at the airsoft place on Shinden, and I want to spend like $5,000 on the most outrageous. Because every kid, you just want to have a crazy airsoft fight your whole life. But your parents are like, it's getting dark. Why aren't you wearing the goggles? Stop shooting us in the house here. Why are you doing this? But you have that just shitty single pistol, and you're like excited with the spin. You're like, look at this one. I want to go in there and just go nuts. So I just need other people it's not that hard to find dudes who want to do this, but if you guys want to participate, I mean, I'm talking like, have you seen the Dude Perfect videos where what they do is you put up 3 balloons like Mario Kart and you shoot the balloon. And when the balloon pops, you lose a life. And so it's a legitimate, this isn't like some bullshit, kind of like willy-nilly thing. Like We're going to be maybe ghillie suits. I don't know how far we're going to go.
So here's the thing. When I was a teenager, we played paintball with slingshots because you get a whole bunch of people together, like the wrist rockets, and it required so much more skill. And so we'd be like roaming the hills with like 25 friends from church on teams playing capture the flag paintball with
in Wilderness Ranch.
In Wilderness Ranch with slingshots, and so like
That's another video right there. We're doing that too. I'm in.
No 100%. One had to have
100%.
fancy gear, you know, like for $30 you had all your paintballs and all of that, and so it was a good time. Yeah, but then you'd like sneak up behind someone and just nail them. Hurts.
Oh,
so
that
bad.
Sounds so fun. Oh man. Okay, well I guess we should talk about business stuff. Or we can just talk about, you know, our childhood dream. That's the point of money, is to go and do the things you wanted to do as a kid. Do you ever feel like you're surprised that you're an adult?
No, I tried to grow up really fast.
Oh, really?
Like I graduated high school at 15, dropped out of college at 17. Like, yeah, no, wow. I was very much in a hurry to grow up and make money.
See, I feel like some days I'm like, I remember grown-ups, I'm like, I'm one of those now. And it really surprised, or I'm like,
I'm not sure that you actually are.
I don't know if I am.
I think physically, yes.
Physically, I'm a grown man, but I'm just doing the stuff I wanted to do as a kid. Yeah. Well, I just like, there are things that happen and I'm like, or I'll be like, oh, I wonder if I can do that. Like, I wonder if my parents will, and then I'm like, wait, I'm 32. I don't have anybody to, I think you get used to not being able to do stuff because you're a kid. And then now I'm like, oh, I can do stuff.
You can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why did you want to grow up so fast?
Not having money sucks.
Yeah.
And yeah, when someone, I think I was like 15, maybe. And someone told me that making money is a skill and that you can get better at it, like a musical instrument or whatever else. And so I was like, oh, wait, really? Yeah. And so then I was like, let me grow up so that yeah, I can make money and buy all my own stuff and move out and everything else. So
that's something. So you have that article about the wealth ladder,
the ladders of wealth creation.
The ladders of wealth creation. Everybody should read that article. Where do you find it?
nathanberry.com/wealth creation.
nathanberry.com/wealth creation. I read it a few weeks ago and it's awesome. I have the 7 levels of earning thing, and it's like the concept of what you move through. Nathan did a really, really good job, and especially for a free article. It's like a product.
Yeah. Someday it'll probably be a book.
It should be. It's really cool. It's just a really cool Barry with a B-E. No, B-A.
B-A.
It's a really cool concept of like really well thought out understanding of how you go through the levels of sort of wealth creation. And I think that what you just said is something that people don't understand, is that making money is a skill.
Yeah, it's a combination of like 1,000 little skills. Just like if we were going to play the piano or something, right? You know, we need to be able to read music. We need to have timing and rhythm, and like there's all these skills that you need to learn. And money's the same way. And so the point of the article is just going into like, what are those, and in what sequence? Like, what are the skills, in what sequence should you learn them, and then what are you trying to optimize for? Like, right. You know, lifestyle, maximum wealth, all of that. And just trying to explain some of these concepts of like, why do some people earn $1 million a year when others earn 100,000? Why, when everyone wants to get into software, they're like, oh, I'm going to start a social network. And why is that like the most impossible thing? You know, and just trying to put that in a way that people can understand. Like,
what do you think is the biggest difference between people who are at 100,000 versus $1 million?
Oh, they have leverage, right? So, most people earning 100,000 a year are trading time for money in some way.
Yep.
Or they're moving up. Maybe they have some simple products, but they're being sold to an email list of 10,000 people, right? So whenever you can implement leverage, then you're going to get to the point where whatever your inputs are completely disconnected from the outputs. And on one hand, that sucks, right? You and I could sit down and write a book. We could spend hundreds of hours to do it and sell 2 copies. You know, like, right. Well,
that was a waste.
Fuck, that was a waste. Yeah. You know, like total waste of time, you know, and maybe it's like, oh, I would have gotten paid $50 an hour to write this for somebody else. Right. But then on the other side, that book could go sell 10,000 copies or 50,000 copies. Right. And it earns the same.
Right.
James Clear is a good friend of mine, and he's been on Convertkit for a long time. And actually had him out here. Like, we hosted a mastermind, and he came out and we were hanging out in McCall, which is like 2 hours from here for anyone who knows.
And James Clear wrote Atomic Habits, for those who don't know, which is like, it's like a phenomenon.
It was the #1 selling book on Amazon last year. Well, like, it outsold Michelle Obama, Goodnight Moon, whatever, like every category of books.
Well, I was on Amazon yesterday, and the banner at the top is like about Prime, whatever it is, but it's got Atomic Habits as the picture in the banner. Like, it's wild.
Yeah, and so if you look at that, like he has, he's selling tens of millions of dollars worth of books every year. And it's his time writing that book is completely disconnected from his earnings.
Right.
And, that's powered by his email list and everything else. But
which is powered by Convertkit.
But that's where, that difference in earnings is all about leverage, right? Like we can pick pretty much anything. My background before was in iPhone apps. You can spend thousands of hours building an iPhone app, and it can sell 50 copies, or it could go on to be wildly successful. And so then it's really just breaking down what goes into leverage and what skills you have to learn.
Yeah, and to give some context here, Convertkit, just so you guys know, if you don't know Nathan, is super valuable company. That's, I don't know if you can
I can share any numbers.
Things.
So we're 31 million a year in revenue.
Okay.
We're 70 people, a distributed team.
No can outside say capital. What valuation you got, or that part? No,
we can say that. We did. We had some team members who wanted to sell shares at the end of, maybe backing up a tiny bit. We got an acquisition offer from Spotify, like May of last year. I thought about it.
I don't know if you guys have heard of Spotify. It's just a little company,
just a little
that
bit.
Does. They do, I think, music and some podcasts and whatever.
Like in my post talking about it, like internally to the team, I said something like they're pretty big in music, and someone, just like as a throwaway, and someone quoted that and was like, pretty big. Yeah. Okay.
I've heard of them.
Yeah.
What happened to Pandora, by the way?
I have no idea. I don't know. They used a lot of.
Simpo was talking about that speech, by the way. Did you look up that speech, the Pandora guy's speech?
From like forever ago, where he got people to work for 2 years without pay. Yeah.
It's like, that didn't work out. I mean, those people, he's like this inspirational. So he's like, you're going to work the 2 years with no pay. And then like, well, it's been 7 now. I don't know. It doesn't even exist.
I mean, music. So here's the thing with, the problem is music licensing. Okay. And we're like off in very random topics right now.
That's okay.
But, so when I was talking to people from Spotify, I was wondering why we were on their radar. And we'd purchased a company at the beginning of last year called FanBridge, which is email marketing for music. So we have like Tim McGraw and Leon Bridges and Mandy Moore and a whole bunch of.
You purchased that company? Yeah,
we bought that company.
How did that go? Like, how did you do that, or what made you decide?
Yeah, so we were growing in music. Like we had a lot of the people that I mentioned.
And you mean like musicians are using your platform as their email marketing provider?
Yeah, we always used to joke because for the longest time, I think starting like 4 or 5 years ago, we had Tim Ferriss and Tim McGraw. And so we're like, oh, we have all the famous Tims on Convertkit. But they were like, hey, what are the biggest players in music for email marketing? MailChimp is the biggest. Actually, Salesforce Marketing Cloud was used by a lot of the big labels.
Surprise! Oh, the labels. Okay.
Yeah. And then there's this tool called FanBridge that you could tell wasn't really growing. They'd been venture backed years earlier. And so we reached out to them.
Was it an ESP? Like they were an email service provider that was okay.
Focused on musicians specifically. So when we bought them and announced the deal, and it got written up in Billboard and other like industry publications, then Spotify reached out after that. And I was like, oh, they want to acquire us because we're getting into music. And the guy was like, well, that's how you got on our radar. But actually podcasts are what we care about. Right. And because we have all these top podcasters like Farnham Street and Ryan Holiday and, all these other Tim Ferriss and others. And what the guy explained is he's like, look, when you play a song on Spotify, we have to pay the artist, the labels, whoever wrote the song, like there's a whole long chain in music licensing. When you play a podcast on Spotify, we don't pay anybody. We want to grow in podcasts. And so that's why they've been acquiring Anchor and these others, right?
Well, and people are so fast. That's why I just don't give opinions on things that I don't know about. Yeah, where people would be like, Spotify's assholes. They don't pay their artists enough. And I'm like, I don't know.
They pay a ton of money.
I was like, I don't know if that's true, but people throw it out that like they bash Spotify as though they're these like slave laborers. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm not going to comment because people are just so quick to be like, fuck corporations. I'm like, corporations are the reason America exists. and you have jobs and things.
Yeah.
Like, but it's interesting that there are so many people involved, right? So
Yeah.
that's the
So
the pain.
to answer two questions
Yeah.
with one, why is Pandora struggling? Music licensing is very, very expensive and complicated.
Okay.
And then the other side, to get to the valuation, we turned down that offer from Spotify. Like, I thought about it a bunch and decided not to do it.
You think you'll regret that later?
I don't think so, but we'll see. You know,
I hope not. But it's a crazy amount.
And so then we, I had people on my team who were like, we did want to, like, you know, that would have been pretty amazing. And so we put together a small secondary round with basically a bunch of friends who were angel investors. Actually, Dharmesh Shah, who's the CTO of HubSpot, and a longtime friend, he reached out and he was like, "Hey, I'll buy $1 million worth of shares from anybody who, like, any team member who wants to sell." So we put that deal together August of last year, and that was at a $200 million valuation.
Wow!
So
that's
about the team sold about 3% of the company.
That's amazing. That's what's so crazy for people listening, is like understanding that software is valued at such a different multiple. Like, if you have a mega buddy with $30 million supplement company, it might be worth 15.
Yeah, it's gonna be valued on
and even though, but there's huge amounts of recurring, like in that one particular, his might be worth more, the one I'm thinking of. But like, I mean, even like BioTrust trying to sell their company was a nightmare. I don't even know if they ended up doing it now. And it's just like, well, they were also emailing 6 times a day at that time.
Oh, wow.
And so the people were like, well, they would just, it was, you know, they'd make a bunch, but one of the people trying to buy it was on the list and was like, this is too much. But they were, you know, it was a real aggressive direct response thing. But you're like, they're doing 100 million a year and having, you know, it's to be doing 31 million in revenue and be worth 200 million is pretty amazing.
Yeah. And I was actually just yesterday at a conference with another guy who bought quite a bit of the shares. He's the single largest shareholder.
Other than you?
The single largest shareholder of that, like, group of investors.
Okay.
Yeah. I own a little more than 90% of the company.
Okay.
And so he was just like, we set the valuation at 7 times annual recurring revenue. And he was like, why didn't you set it at like 12 or 14? Like, you could go way higher.
Yeah.
And he's like, I would have happily bought in, you know, more than $1 million worth at those numbers. And really what it is we're trying to design a system where we get the benefits of being publicly traded, of like employees having liquidity and all of that, without actually having the downsides of being publicly traded. And so what I want is this, like, I went with a deliberately lower valuation so that I'm going to do it every 2 years is the plan. So that the next time that we go about doing this, right, we can, even if the market's down, I know for sure I won't end up at a down round or that sort of thing.
Have you watched Silicon Valley?
Only a little bit.
Oh, dude, that show is really good. The last season, you know, like a lot, it's not quite as good, but that show is so good. And it's Mike Judge. He actually just did a podcast with Joe Rogan. I listened to the whole thing. It's really interesting. He did Beavis and Butthead, Idiocracy, Office Space. Like, I was like, watching Office Space gets you inspired to write for people, because I never had a shitty job. Yeah. And I'm like, God, this would be horrible. Like, we need to help people. If this is really their life. But in Silicon Valley, there's this guy who's just like, he's like, you know, suicidal because he had this huge valuation, and then he had a down round. Right. And that's like I think it's like a whole episode of you. It's like, never have a down round, man. He's like, I was on top of the world. Everything was working out, and I had a down round. I never have a down round. And it's like, so I'm like, oh, I get it. Yeah. Well, I know. I mean, is that where you learned it from? Was it from watching Silicon Valley that you got this idea?
No, but I wish that'd be a better story.
That'd be a great story.
You know, like, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. So yeah, that's where I got
it. Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah.
But I have a bunch of friends right now who run, you know, publicly traded software companies, right? And they're down 75-80% over the peak from last fall. And like, that can be really demoralizing for the team. Like, Bezos has a line that talks about not long after they went public, and he was basically saying, you know, stock price is going crazy, all of us back whenever it was, 99, 2000, 98 time period. And he tells his team like, hey, don't look at that stock price and think that you're a genius, because that stock price is going to come down and you don't want the opposite feeling. Like if you're looking at it going like, wow, look how successful, look how amazing we are because the stock price is going up. Then when it inevitably comes down, for a long period of time, you're going to be like, wow, I'm such an idiot. Like I've made bad decisions. He's like, no, just the market is changing. And so I wanted to start with a lower price and do it in a way that I could control it over time.
That makes sense. I've never heard anybody say that you want the benefits of being a publicly traded company without the downsides, because it's not fun, right? Do you actually want that? Would you want to be publicly traded?
No, because I don't want to do earnings calls. I don't want to.
Right.
Like for this round,
we heard you were playing airsoft in the mountains with some comedian guy. What is this? What is this that you're doing?
Yeah. It's not something that I'm interested in.
Yeah, you don't want that lifestyle. So, I think one of the things I'd be curious to hear is how you focus and how you spend your time, because obviously you've got Convertkit, which is how many years old?
9.
Wow. Okay. So 9 years old. And then you've got the Airbnb stuff that you do.
Yep.
And then you've got the
Boise newsletter
from Boise.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I saw the comedy stuff in there. That was cool. Is all the like comedy stuff for the weekend that's going on.
Yeah, when you get good at comedy, we'll feature you.
Oh, thanks, man. I really appreciate that. I'll tell you that I can confidently say that I am better than the people here.
I believe it. Yeah, so I have a large business, a medium business, and a small business. So we've got Convertkit, which is nearly all of my time.
Right.
99%.
Is it 99? Would you say it's that much?
Probably if we got into it mathematically, it's not quite, but
it's it's like 90, 95%.
Yeah. The Airbnb business is something that I always wanted to do. I like things in the real world. I have a friend who says, if you work with your mind, you should rest with your hands. And so that is like, get into like, do woodworking, gardening, like something that you're like tactically doing rather than just saying, oh, let me switch from my software business to my blogging business as a break, right? It's like,
I'll just go ahead and grab an axe and just chop stuff down. And man, as Whitney's always like, you're not a built by hands person. And I'm like, if it's destroying stuff, I destroy
stuff with my hands. Have you ever torn it, like remodeled or something where you have to tear out a wall of drywall?
No, I want to.
A hammer
I want to just do that. I'll pay to do that just to get bash stuff. There's no way you can go home and not feel great.
Yeah, if we ever have to demolish something, I'll call you.
Dude, I'm your guy. If you want something absolutely destroyed, please. I'm serious about that. Like I'll show up and just take down a wall. I don't even need tools. I'll just beat it down. I'll just hit it.
You're just running and jumping through the wall.
Just juggernauting.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
So I've always liked Airbnbs, and I'm fascinated with them actually going back to the Ladders of Wealth Creation article as a step in building wealth, because a lot of what you do with an Airbnb a lot of it can be done on nights and weekends and does not require like a lot of skilled labor. Like if you're putting a new Airbnb together, there's a ridiculous amount of furniture that needs to be hauled and set up and all of that, and you can get into it with not a crazy amount of money and a lot of sweat equity. And so I think it's an interesting way for people to build wealth. So I wanted to learn more about it. And so we started, when we bought our farm, it had a little 500 square foot guest house on there. And so we remodeled that, I guess 5 years ago, and then started renting it out. And then I partnered with 2 other friends, one who's in construction and the other who runs the business side of it. And we just started buying.
And you're more of the money side, right?
Yeah. Yep. And so I'll buy and finance the properties. So we now have 16 units across 6 properties on Airbnb, all here in the Boise area.
That's awesome. And is it how much? I think one quick note on that for everybody is that you earn your right to do less shit, right? Like the people who don't have the capital do more of the work. The person who has the capital does less of the work. Like as you move through these levels of earning and wealth, you earn the right essentially to put in less time to these projects. So because the thing about Airbnb and real estate in general is that it's such a reactive industry. like if you don't have your phone and somebody's like, hey, this is
Right.
broken, this is like that.
Yeah.
So how do you handle that? You're not the person handling it.
Yeah. So we now have an employee that handles all of the like responses on the app and, you know, coordinating all of that. And then Philip, our business partner who handles, you know, most of the business logistics, is kind of the next person.
Okay.
So very few problems get to me. Actually, I enjoy it. And so I probably pay more attention than I should. But there's nothing that I need to. The other thing that I like about it is I've got 3 kids. And if you were to try to explain to kids what like Convertkit is, you know, or like any way that you make money on your computer, like it doesn't make sense.
How old are they?
They are 10, 8, and 2.5.
Okay. So 2.5 just doesn't get it, huh?
Yeah. But even like, you know, at 8 years old, right? You know, you don't really understand. I don't know.
Yeah.
Dad sits in front of his laptop and like,
Yeah.
we have groceries, you know, like, but an Airbnb with our guest house, you know, you can explain, hey, here's this place, right? We fix it up. It costs money to fix this up, make it nicer. That lets us go from charging $130 a night to $150, say, you know, or let me take better photos. And they can understand, wait, okay, so someone's paying to stay here in the same way that we would pay to stay in a hotel. Like it starts to make sense. And that's a form of leverage, right? Because we make that property, you know, we buy it, make it nice, and now it's working for us. And so I can show them these examples of like, here's active income, right? We could be the ones cleaning it, you know, and I'll pay them to help clean it. And we'll do some of that together. And then there's the other side of like, or we can pay someone else and our margins are a bit lower, but now it's all.
And are you teaching this to your kids in a way? Is that what you're saying too? So they can understand this? That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I want them to have memories of like us going on a Saturday to one of our new Airbnbs and setting up a bunch of furniture. Right. And like actually, you know, working, having.
And you want to get paid to hang out with your kids because otherwise it's
just, otherwise what's the point? What's to monetize everything.
What's the point? Yeah, you got to monetize that time. You got to be like, look, kids, if you really want to hang out with dad, we got to be making money. Okay. These are the rules. That's how you really create a healthy childhood is you create that relationship with them. I'm going to be a great dad. So your involvement at this point and how income wise for you, how does that pan out? Like what's
we've been rolling pretty much everything into buying the next property. I think at this point it's like big enough as a hobby business, and I'd say hobby. So it's going to do 750,000 in revenue this year.
Wow. And what are the margins on something like that?
Yeah, it depends on how you calculate it. Because you know, are you
without paying the people that you like, without paying you 3? I'd say before that, what
it'll put off like total like 250,000 in cash.
Awesome.
And so it's really good. And that's where like Boise's a very seasonal market. And so spring and summer is going to make a bunch. Winter, you know, you're going to cover, you know, more than cover your mortgage payments and all of that. But
but you can have the big spike.
Yeah. The biggest thing that we're looking at is
what about fall? Not fall. Dude, the trees
fall's
here
decent.
Are outrageous.
Yeah.
But you fly into Boise in the fall, it's like one of the most beautiful things ever.
Yeah. But really it's like the summer is the peak.
Makes sense.
July and August are the peak.
So you're just rolling in it right now. Just printing cash.
It's pretty good. And then you also look at the debt service, right? Of, you know, the equity you're building up, paying down mortgages.
Yeah. So what's the goal with those? Because like you said, you've basically been rolling it into buying more. Is the goal to build a portfolio, like a large asset class, basically of real estate that you own, or is it's because you don't need the cash flow?
Yeah. We're going to start taking the cash because my partners are ready for it.
Yeah. But you don't personally. You don't need
it.
So nice. Your preference would be it's
one of my favorite things is like finding something that I want to spend money on.
Yeah, and justifying.
And then going and finding something else too. Like business is a game, right? Yeah. We're all like, you're just playing Monopoly in real life, whether it's through whatever you're doing. And so at some point you're just optimizing for fun.
Yeah.
And so I could take the money from Convertkit and go do this thing, you know, like a ridiculous splurge or something like that. But it's more fun to be like, oh, I'm going to launch this paid email course that I've been wanting to write, and I'm going to publish that through Convertkit. And then the money that makes, I'm going to go use for this splurge. Like,
it's like different categories, right? Because like when you make money from this one thing, you're like, this pays for this.
Yeah.
Even though it's all the same, technically,
it's all the
it's
same
not
money.
in your mind.
Yeah.
Like for me now, with Call Me Maybe, I'm like, all right, I just paid for dinner on this drive over. Like, well, theoretically, any of my other money would have paid for it,
Yeah.
but it's this category. This just paid for my dinner. Now we can do.
Yeah, it's a fun way of thinking about it. Years ago, I wanted to go to a conference called MicroConf, which is like for small software companies, and they were hosting it in Prague. And I wanted to go, but like flights were expensive.
Italy, huh? The look on your face, that little brief moment of,
am I
gonna serious right now? My mom the other day goes, "Oh, Czechoslovakia." I'm like, "Nope, not anymore." She goes, "That's a real place, Ian." I'm like, "Mom, you were just in Europe like last week. It was a real place." And she's like committed, and I'm like, "No."
Oh man,
but yeah, I love Italy.
So we wanted to do this trip, and it was like Convertkit was super early on. I was doing my ebook stuff at the time, but like, dropping $5,000 on to go to a conference like felt like really a lot,
right?
Between the flights and everything. And a friend named Brendan Dunn was like, "Hey, do you want the trip to be free?" And I'm like, "Absolutely, I want the trip to be free." And so he's like, "Let's go to London first and teach a workshop just to like 20 people. Let's have a great time in London, and then continue on to Prague and like have the revenue from that workshop cover the whole thing."
Right.
And we could have paid for it with other money, but it made it really fun to like, and we figured out the revenue from the workshop and everything else. And we're like, we're clearing like more than $1,000 even after all of our expenses for this whole trip. And so like, let's go out for like a really fancy dinner. And we just had a great time. And it like helped shape this playful relationship with money where you're like, oh, I want to do this thing. Let me put in a bit of extra effort over here to cover it.
And so the Airbnb stuff, you said you're enjoying it, right? So will you continue to just kind of roll up more properties? Is that the goal? I'm
not sure. There's, I had a friend in high school, who his grandmother, so his grandfather passed away when his grandma was 60. So they were both pretty young, when his grandfather passed away. And so she's 60. She lived, she had a house in Boise and then also a house up in Council, Idaho, which is a small town, a couple hours outside of Boise. And now at 60 years old, like she hadn't really worked. She's like, what do I want to do? She wasn't wealthy, but if you save and invest money over 40 years, like most 60-year-old people who have been responsible with money have a decent amount. So she decided that she wanted to buy a small house and rent it out. So she bought this little, at the time, like probably $60,000-$70,000 house, rented it out. And she just kept doing that. Like once a year, she just bought a house and rented it. And then she ended up building this property portfolio. So I met her when she was probably 85. And so for the previous 25 years,
right in her prime.
Exactly. Yeah. She'd been buying, started a house a year, and then it was 2, and then it was 3. And so she had this property portfolio that was 50 houses or more.
Jeez.
And just the appreciation on all of this. And there was no like business plan with it. She was just like, yeah, the profits, I'm just going to keep investing it in the next thing. And so what always stood out to me is like taking something like buying real estate or anything that appreciates and just doing it consistently over a long period of time.
Yeah.
And so I was like, whoa, if I bought a house a year for the next, and rented it out for the next 30 or 40 years, like that's a pretty ridiculous real estate portfolio.
Yeah. And
pretty soon the cash flow from each one funds, like it just snowballs from there.
Right.
I don't know that I actually want to do that because of like the valuation on ConvertKit and everything else. Like there are probably better ways for me to make money.
Yeah.
But I love the concept of it.
Talk to Jeff.
Yeah.
That's his thing. But yeah, it's interesting hearing just, I mean, how does that change your relationship to work and really just life in general when you get that valuation? Do you feel different? Were you surprised? Did you know it was worth that much at that time?
Yeah, I did.
You did. Okay. But to have somebody actually come in and invest at it and cement
yeah,
that that's
being,
a real,
yeah,
it validates a real valuation. How do you feel? Like, is your experience of life different at this point because of that?
I worried for a long time that I was going to run out of money, like up until this point. So I grew up in a house very poor. Like money was a constant struggle between my parents. Watched them divorce over that. And so I always had this idea of like, I'm going to get good at making money.
Right.
And then once you get some level of money and income, you're like, okay, this could go away at any time, and I was very worried about like inflating my lifestyle in such a way that then I'd become the person who's spending
as much as you're making.
Yeah, spending as much as I'm making, or and then say income is $1 million a year, and you're like, great, I'll be responsible. I'll only spend 800,000 a year, and then it's like, okay, but if that income goes down to 500,000 a year, which is an absurd amount of money,
yeah,
all of a sudden, if you get used to certain things and
yeah,
or you're buying this on debt. So I worried for a long time that like if I spent money, I would run out of money. It took me a while to realize that like my favorite thing to buy is income producing assets, so if we're like, oh, let's go splurge on something, right? It's going to be a new
like, you want to go
Airbnb.
get bottle service? You're like, oh no, dude, I'm thinking about buying this tiny house.
Yes, exactly.
Let's go, dude. We're buying tiny houses tonight, dude. You guys going to the club? I'm going to the tiny house auction, dude. We'll be buying up Airbnb.
Oh yeah. Yep. Or use like, yeah. I see a stock dip that I like, and I'm like, oh yes, we get to buy some more Shopify stock. Like, let's go.
Nice.
And so I think
what an exciting weekend.
Yeah.
I'm
I think you and I party a little differently.
I'm gonna go furnish this home with my children and buy some Shopify stock. It's gonna be a wild Friday night.
Let's get lit. So I think when we did the secondary round, I wasn't going to sell any stock. One like preconceived idea that I had in that is that if I sold shares, people would think that like I didn't believe in the company anymore or something else, right? You get these ideas that
right.
You're like, I don't know how that was in my head, but like it's there and it's been there forever.
Well, if you sold a bunch of it, maybe.
Yeah.
Right. If you're like, I'm going to sell 75% of this.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it actually came down to a friend of mine, very randomly. So when you do a secondary round, it's a small two-sided marketplace, right? Because it's like the employees, how much do they want to sell? And people are like, oh, I'll sell like $25,000 with my shares. Someone else like $100,000, right? So that's going up, and you're going out and finding investors, and so you get this back and forth. And I mentioned this to one friend, and he goes like, oh, that's interesting. Like, well, I'm in for $500,000 that he wants to buy. And I was like, okay, cool. And he asked, how big is the total round? I said, I think it'll probably be about 3.5 million of like total shares that get purchased. And so I get this wire from him into AngelList, who's facilitating all of this, for 3.5 million. And I'm like, no, we talked about 500,000. And he's like, yeah, but I talked to AngelList and they said that it's really easy for them to return the money, like whatever doesn't get used. And so I figured I'd just fund the whole thing and return whatever.
That must be nice to be like, just a quick 3.5 mil. I don't give a shit.
As one does.
I didn't even notice it was missing. I just, whatever, dude. Like as if he's like put something on layaway at like a store.
Yeah, exactly.
He's like, oh, I left 3.5 million there. Just they'll send it back if they don't use it.
Yeah, it's a different world.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that I was looking at this. Like as it closed out, I was looking at this account in AngelList that was funded to like $7.5 million. And there was only 3.5 million of demand from team members selling shares. And I thought about it a bunch, and I looked at what I'd do with the money. Well, I'd probably buy more Airbnbs.
That tiny house auction is going to buy itself, man.
We could buy a bunch of them. And what I realized is that like my wife and I didn't have things that we wanted to spend money on, right? Like we already have our farm, that's our dream property. There weren't big splurges that we wanted. And so it just didn't make a big difference for us. And so I was like, great, let's keep the money in Convertkit, keep the shares, keep it compounding, and maybe in a few years, sell some. And then I realized for my parents that like the time actually mattered. And so that's where, like my parents are, and my wife's parents are like 62, 64, and like still 4 or 5 years away from retirement. And so that's when I realized like, oh, I could sell like 1% of the company, clear $2 million and retire all of my parents. And that was a big shift when I realized.
Oh, how many parents do you have?
Both my mom and dad are remarried, so we have
Okay.
6 between Hillary and I. We have 6.
Oh wow! So yeah, you actually mean that. You said that correctly. It sounded like you misspoke, but you didn't. You're like, I got 6 parents. I have. Yeah. We're adding more every week. I'm acquiring tiny homes and parents. I'm trying to get up to 10. 12 would be my ideal. 14 is too many parents. Yeah. So you wanted to retire all of your parents.
All of them. And so that was a really cool use of.
That's an awesome thing to be able to do. I think this is one of the things I talk, like, I have the story about my dog and how he almost died and how if I didn't have money, he'd be dead right now. And it's one of the things I really like to reiterate to people is like, money is not just this materialistic thing. Like those things are great. Also, you should buy those things. Like you shouldn't, if you make money, where you live should be amazing, because you spend, especially these days, 80 to 90% of your time in a home that you have. For so many people who work from home and stuff, like people like, you should only spend 10% of your income on your house. I'm like, you should, if there's one thing you should spend a lot on, it's the place you live. It will literally change how you feel every day. But to be able to do something like that, like I would love if I could do that for my parents right now, just sell 1% of my company for a quick couple mil and then be like, hey, you guys can do whatever now. Cause they have money, but my mom would be, I would say my mom would, if she won $100 million in the lottery, she'd be like, well, it's only 50 million after taxes. If Jesus was her son, she'd be like, oh, you're a carpenter, Messiah, huh? Well, Dominic's a doctor. Did you know that? But what does that actually look like when you say like you retired them? How do you, did certain parents get more than other parents? So
what I actually did, I talked to them about it. They were all excited.
They're excited about that's I can't believe it.
Well, I mean, you could have all kinds of family dynamics, right? Where that could go over really poorly.
No, of course. They could be like, why do you think we need money? What are you doing? Yeah.
What we ended up doing is, instead of a lump sum, because I asked them, like, do you want a lump sum of money? And they're like, or do you want like a consistent, income? And with a lump sum, they're like, we would just come right back to you and ask, how should we invest this? And so what I did instead is I invested the money, and then
Shopify and tiny houses,
Airbnbs, all of that, and then paid them $60,000 a year to stay under the tax limits. And so then basically giving them that $60,000 a year income forever.
Paid monthly?
Paid yearly. So that we did that. I basically in September, gave each couple $60,000, and then when January rolled around, another 60, and then it's just every January 1st, 60 grand, which is,
does that change? That changes the ability to do things like where they're at monetarily now they can not work.
Yeah, because they're like, they don't need to save more for retirement. Think of all the things that, like my first job as a software designer was making 60 grand a year. You think about like everything you're trying to do with that.
Right.
They were all at the point where like they're trying to save more. They're trying to build up their retirement. They all had paid off houses,
so that's $5,000 that they get to live off.
$5,000, and it's tax free
house. Okay.
Right. So
that's what I was going to ask. How does that work for you and for them? Like, how do you give, because people say that type of stuff and then you're like, well, how does that actually work?
Yeah. Well, I bet that your next guest could probably talk about that even more, but who knows? So you can, the gift tax annual exemption is, I believe, $16,000 a year. I think it just got raised to that. And so what that means is, like, I could give my dad $16,000 a year without paying gift taxes on it, or it counting against my lifetime exemption, which is currently $11 million per person. But I've already used that up because I've gifted stock into trusts and things like that with him.
Okay.
So that means I can give my dad 16,000 a year, and I can give my mom, like I can give each individual person 16,000 without paying gift taxes on it. And then my wife can do the same. And so it's, I give my dad and my stepmom 16,000 each for 32. My wife does the same. And so you end up at 64,000 without having to use up more of my exemption, which I've already fully used.
Okay. So if you,
so I pay taxes on the money.
But if it was 80,000,
then you'd have a certain amount that would count towards your lifetime exemption.
Okay.
Which is currently giant, and most people never hit it. But a future administration, we're getting to tax stuff in. But I don't know. This is fun stuff.
No. Well, so do you pay taxes? Is that a write-off?
Do I pay taxes? Yes, I do pay taxes. If anyone asks.
If they ask, yes. Hi, IRS. Yes, I do.
You never know who's in these masterminds. Oh man. It is
I've got my IRS auditors here. I just make sure he's listening to everything I'm saying. That's yeah. But so do you pay? Is that a write-off for you then?
No.
The 16,000, the 32,000 for each.
I'd have to ask my CPA, but I don't think so.
Should that be? Can't you write that? Is that not a write-off?
No, if you're gifting.
Yeah.
Oh, so if your gift, because they're getting the tax, they're not having to pay the tax.
Yeah.
It still count like you're still paying on that. Wow, that's a really good
thing. And you don't have
to
to pay the additional. There'd be additional gift taxes on it that you would have to pay.
Okay.
The IRS gets their money every which way. But like, here's how you can, within this limit, you can give away.
Okay.
Some. Now, most people never hit that, right? Because the current, lifetime exemption is 11, almost 12 million per person, right? So between my wife and I, that's 24 million basically.
Okay.
But when you move company stock, like if you wait too long, like I did, and your company has a high valuation, and then you want to move it into trusts and gift to kids and that kind of thing, then you can burn through a $24 million lifetime exemption pretty quickly.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have.
It is. Yeah.
So
if you started earlier,
right?
If you have a company that you think is going somewhere, like get some of those shares into the proper trusts, like really early, and then
Jeff, can we talk about this, please? Yeah. So back to sort of that feeling, like, do you obviously that's a very cool thing you get to do. I'm sure that felt very good.
Yep.
Right. But how do you? Because it sounds like you had almost not the healthiest relationship to money.
No, I like a total scarcity mindset.
Yeah. How
people talk about a scarcity mindset or an abundance mindset, you can have both simultaneously.
Yes, 100%.
And I had both cranked all the way up.
Interesting. So you're basically driving with 2 feet.
Yeah, like I'm realizing, wow, I can make any amount of money.
Yeah.
And it might all completely disappear, and that would not be okay.
Right.
And so
did you work on that feel like, because that's a lot. I don't know if you know this, but I did teach these meditations and stuff, and that's a lot of what I'm most interested in with what I teach at this point is really going through people's childhood money blocks, the things that they watch their parents fighting about money and decide I'm never going to be that person. But then there's this constant scarcity, and there's these things that get ingrained in us. And it doesn't matter how good of skills you get, if you have this really bad relationship to money, it's going to be tough to either make a lot or to keep it, because you'll find ways to offload it if you don't feel worthy. So for you, did you work on the emotional relationship, or did it get solved by actually finally having enough?
No, I worked on the emotional relationship.
And how did you do that? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, talking through it a lot of journaling. I have a executive coach that I hire, and working through a lot of that with him.
Okay.
Also, like making some more deliberate splurges. I would always, like, as income went up, I would splurge on things, but I would always justify it in some way, right? Like I bought a Tesla, but I bought one that was 2 years old and had 15,000 miles on it, because that saved 40. You're like, but this is the best, like the smartest possible way you could buy.
Right. So you
your
weren't
dream.
just freely, you weren't allowing yourself to just have an experience that was unjustified.
Yep. Or, I would only do it if I could counteract the income in some other way, like we were talking about earlier, which is tons of fun, but then you have to make sure that that's not like your crutch that you're using.
Yeah.
So earlier this year, I guess to get into specifics, went on a sailing trip with my wife and a couple of friends, and we booked a Gulf Stream to go sailing in Belize. And that was like, I can't justify that in any way,
And what is a Gulf Stream for people who don't know?
It is a 14-person private jet. cost like $100,000 to fly that to Belize.
Right.
And that was like, okay, if I flew commercial, it would be free with points,
Right.
all of that. And that was like, let me go, and I'm just gonna do a splurge that is
Right.
amazing and fun. And
how much better was the experience?
Oh, it was fantastic. I had this moment sitting at one end of the plane as we're flying back, and I was talking to my brother-in-law, and we were having a great conversation, and I looked over to the middle of the plane, and my wife and her other brother and her uncle, who we brought on the trip because he taught us how to sail years ago, they're just laughing and joking and having the best time. And then if I look at the very front of the plane, another one of my really good friends and her sister are like having like a really like heartfelt conversation. And it was just such a cool experience to like that snapshot of looking through and realizing like, oh, I created that.
Right.
And
you are responsible for their happiness.
Yeah. You could take that way too far.
I'm kidding. Yeah. No, but that moment wouldn't have existed.
It was a
you
really special moment for me. And like I had a lot of limiting beliefs around money, right? Like if you think you're going to run out of money, that is not something that you ever would do.
Right.
And so like I had to overcome a lot of that. And that was like the one, it was a very therapeutic splurge. So
somebody trying to come in the door there?
Yeah.
Texas.
Watching the live stream. We got food. Nice.
Oh, random. I was like, I didn't recognize that person coming in, and I was like, do we have another speaker coming that I'm not? Like, I was like, who's inviting randos to the house? Like, this isn't that big a viewing party.
If I deliver your DoorDash, can I speak on your podcast?
Yeah, he's like, hey guys, can I get a few minutes on the podcast? I think this is going to become a podcast, but this is so much fun.
Yeah.
I love doing this. So that experience, because I think this is where people want to demonize things or justify them. And that's always signaling, like one of the questions I like to ask people is, if money were a person, a real person, would it want to hang out with you? Okay. And it's like, is it like, well, he keeps me in a dark room and doesn't let me leave. And he's like, when he does hang out with me, he's just like strangling me and he's all worried. It's like so many people are like a needy person, like a needy, boyfriend or girlfriend. And they're like, oh, where are you going? Like, imagine if money was a real person and you're like, hey, where are you going? Are you going out tonight? He's like, I'll be back. You're like, well, how long are you going to be out? Who are you going out with? What are you going to be doing tonight? He's like, dude, just let me go out. I'll be back. Unless you keep doing this, then I won't. And it's like that needy relationship where then money's like, I don't even want to, you know what? I'm done. I don't want to be, I was just going to go hang out with my friends, but now I am going to cheat on you because you're being ridiculous. But if you just trust money and you're like, hey, go have fun tonight.
Right.
Go do whatever you want. Money, it comes back and it's like, hey, I brought home this extra chick. And she's, I'm looking around because Whitney got up for that button.
Let's keep this story going. This analogy going. I think it'll only get better.
And then she brings back one chick, and then the next, she's like, that was so much fun. And then the next night, she's like, I've got 6 friends, and they're all beautiful and well-adjusted, and they just want to have a bunch of wild sex. That's it. And then you're like, wow, this is working out. That's the full analogy. This is, and
you just have to trust money. Is that the takeaway?
That's the takeaway here, is that you have to trust money.
Have trust money?
No. Trust. Yeah. Okay. That's one way to do it. That's one way to do it. Russell was telling us that he got a DM from Hugh Hefner's wife or ex, whatever. I don't know what you call that, widow. But I do think there is something really real about that, where if you have this constant fear around money, it doesn't want to spend time around you either. And I like to think of money as if it was a person, how would it behave around you? But with the private jets and things like that, there's also like, then there'll be the people like, you're an asshole because of gas and you're ruining the environment single-handedly, and these things. And people want to throw stones no matter what. They're going to find a way. But sometimes I think there's such a power in what you said, which is doing something unjustified. Yeah. Doing it because you can, not because there's some line item that you're then going to look at and be able to say this. Now, I will say this company I consult for, that they do like 250 million a year. He was like, I get paid to own jets. And I was like, okay, I got to know this one. He like pops out the spreadsheet, shows me how he's like makes money owning private jets. And I'm like, yes, please. I want to figure this one out.
Yeah. A few different thoughts. One, like a lot of entrepreneurs are, and this is me, right, are the type of people who were in spreadsheets. We love modeling stuff out, like, oh, how could this be true? And they're like, oh, okay, if we did this. So if you're the type of person who's like, I don't know how much money is in my bank account, like, then like go solve those problems well before, or if like a lot of people have the problem with money where they spend way too much of it. And so I have the opposite problem. And so,
right.
This was pushing that in a different way. I think the other thing, just in the relationship with money, a lot of people self-sabotage in different ways. So they get some level of success. Let's say you start a blog, build an email list, write your first ebook, and sell that. It makes $50,000, right, over the course of 6 months. Some people usually do two things. One, they go, wow, I'm a genius at that. Like that works so well. I must be amazing. Let me go do these other things.
Right.
When they should have doubled down here, but they're like, let me go do all these other things. It doesn't work out. And years later, they're like, I don't know, I couldn't replicate it. And it's because they went after all these other businesses. And usually if something's working, you should just do a lot more
just
of that.
do more of that.
Like you have leverage in it, right? You wrote the book, you created the course, whatever it is. Now, instead of 100 people buying it, let's get 500. What has to be true? This is my favorite question ever. What would have to be true for blank? I use it in software design. Someone's like, that's going to take a month. What would have to be true for that to take a week? And we dive into the exercise. And often it's like, there's trade-offs that we don't want to make or whatever else.
Right.
But it forces you to think in that way. And so I always ask, what would have to be true for, Convertkit's at 30 million? What would have to be true for it to be at 60 million a year in revenue? Using that question a lot. The other thing is a lot of people have like a total scarcity mindset around money. And they hit one success, right? That ebook takes off. And then they're the person who's not at all comfortable around money, and they freak out because a lot of people's relationship to money is weird in that they both really, really want it and they hate everyone who has it.
Yeah.
And so if you think about like the intersection of those two things, you get to the point where if you're working so hard to achieve these dreams while you're like dissing on billionaires and everybody else, then you get to the point, say you make your $100,000 and you do it in a way, like you do it with leverage, right? You not leverage in that you had a bunch of debt, but leverage in the way that like something that you thought would make 50 ended up making 100 without you putting in twice as much work.
Right.
You got twice as many sales to the ebook. Then all of a sudden you realize you've just became the person that you hate, who has money, who didn't like work super hard for it. And people like self-sabotage in huge ways. And so probably like the first thing when I hear people talking about their how they hate the rich or whatever else, and then separately, you realize that they want that, and it's like you're never gonna get there.
No,
because you're gonna get the first little taste of that, and like start to understand, like moving up these ladders of wealth creation, you'll get to a higher rung, and then you'll just destroy yourself because you actually hate that version.
Yeah, there's 5, like I've identified 5 core money blocks, and this is like what I teach people. And then they do the meditations and work through them and these things. And it's first one's rich people are assholes. The second one is money is bad or evil. The third is there isn't enough money, which is essentially scarcity. The fourth is I have to work harder or longer hours to make more. And then the fifth is I'm not worthy or I don't deserve it. And so everybody has certain levels, except not necessarily of the first two, but the people who have the first two of money is bad or evil or rich people are assholes are almost always like, when I'll do this in a room and I'm like, raise your hand if you think this. Of course they're ashamed to say it, but they're like, and if they're in a room about making money, they're also less likely to be, have that belief. But those people rarely have even had any level of success, because literally becoming successful is antithetical to their belief of themselves.
Right.
They're like, well, I don't want to be rich because then I'll be an asshole. It's like, no, money's just an amplifier of what you are. If you're an asshole, it'll make you more of an asshole. If you're a good person, it tends to make you a better person because it gives you access to do better things for people. You couldn't fly your family out on a private jet if you didn't have the money. Like, you
Right.
literally, that experience can't exist without you earning that. You're not like, oh, I'm going to do this and then I'm going to tell people about it so that they feel bad about me flying in a jet or whatever. But so for you, how did you, because I doubt that you would have built a company worth, there are people who build very successful things and make a lot of money from a place of fear, but they tend to lose it, or they're just miserable. You're like, yeah, that guy's really rich, but he's miserable. And they have a bunch of money, but they're still afraid of losing it all the time. When was this, was there like a big shift, or was it more of a gradual, constant work of like, I'm going to keep working through the scarcity feeling that I have?
I think it's gradual, constant work. Some people have these big shifts, you know, where like a certain moment and they could point to that as a before and after. I don't have it. I think the biggest thing is like demonstrating consistency over time, right? So in 2012, I released my first ebook to an email list of 800 people, and it made $12,000 in the first day. And I was expecting it to make $10,000 over the entire like lifetime of the book. So you have a moment like that. And of course, the next day it's making, you know, like you did a launch, so it's not consistent. So you're like, you might feel like, you know, you captured lightning in a bottle. But then if you do that more and more, and then you get to consistent income, and you learn, okay, these parts of it, I may have lucked into the factors that made this happen, but they're very like repeatable factors. And so then you get to the point where you realize like, okay, this is a set of skills, and you know, I can sit down and play a concerto at the piano, and it is not luck, right? It is a ton of practice over time, and you have the confidence that you can do that. So for me, it's just like the last 10 years of learning all the skills to make money on the internet, and then demonstrating over time. And then I go,
and that changed the feeling though of the fear of loss.
Yeah,
because you have the knowledge and belief in your ability to make money.
Yeah, and just the track record,
right?
You know,
but is the feeling gone, would you say, or do you still have that feeling, that kind of back of the mind, I could just lose all this?
I think the feeling's gone. I'm trying to think of the last time that I felt like I could lose it all. I think now actually I feel more of I could lose it all and that would be fine.
Interesting. So there's I could lose it all, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's probably the next level of figuring that out, of like the separation between. Okay, so if we want to get into it, the reason. So I grew up in like a Christian household, and my dad ran a Christian bookstore, and they had like these rules of what it meant to be like an elder in the church. You know, your family has to behave a certain way.
What's the
like non-denominational Christian?
Okay.
And so the message that I always got as a kid, like if we'd misbehave or whatever else, it was not like act, you know, like here's how you're going to need to learn to act to be like a functioning member of society, like stop being an asshole, like,
yeah,
you know, whatever. It was much more like, if you don't change the way you behave, that reflects poorly on, you know, on my dad. And then he's not eligible to be like in ministry in the church, which that is our livelihood. So change the way that you behave
so that we don't lose our house.
Wow. So I grew up with this.
That's an intense relationship to money.
It's not
or
so
even
good.
just to behavior.
So if you wonder why at 12, 13, 14, I was like, how do I finish high school as fast as possible? Yeah. How do I learn how to make money so that I won't be a burden on other people?
God. That's tough. That's just that thought, that feeling that you're a burden.
Yeah.
Is a difficult thing.
So most of my relationship to money over the last 20 years, I'm 32 now. I think the first time that conversation happened, I was like 11.
When's your birthday?
June 29th.
That's right. Yeah, we're 11 days apart.
That's right.
Yeah. Are
you older?
You're my youth. So much I could teach you, man. Yeah. There's so much I could teach you. These extra 11 days I've had have been full of just wisdom.
That's right.
So if you ever need any advice, I got you covered, man.
You're the first
I've been
person
here
that
for
I'll text.
11 days more than you.
Yeah, and so like a lot of, I was trying to make it so that I could earn so much money, take care of everybody else and all of that. Like if I ask you to do something for me, I might feel like, oh, am I a burden on you for that thing? I might not trust that you're gonna say no. If you don't actually want to do it, you might be like, yeah, I'll do it, but damn it, there's Nathan like asking for more things again, or something like
That's
that.
how I feel since meeting you. Constantly just pulling,
just burdened all the time.
God.
And so one way that I can counteract that is I can make sure that I give each person in my life way more than I receive. And you don't actually have to deal, like I can guarantee that I'm not a burden on someone else, because it's like, oh, I'm the one that paid for dinner. I'm the one that showed up at your house on a Saturday to help you move, like whatever other thing. And
but you're not using it as a tool to try and make yourself feel better than them.
I'm just
it for your own desires. It's not like you're not trying to be like, you don't have that invisible scorecard. I've done this, motherfucker. Like,
no, it's very much like I never want to be a burden on someone else. And so how do I make sure that happens? And to be clear, it's not healthy at all.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't want to say it, but
and so that's kind of the, like, I think in all of these levels, there's getting comfortable with them, like earning the money, getting comfortable with it, having a much healthier relationship with it. And then I think where I'm at now is realizing the extent that I've used it to be generous, so much so that like I'm guaranteeing I'm not a burden on other people. And I think the thing I'm working on most now is getting to a feeling of like, if I didn't have it, that would be fine. And if I was a burden on someone else, that would be fine.
Right.
Like, because
that's mainly, that's
worthy.
your thoughts. I think it's probably very rare that people actually feel that way about you, but it's your own fear just from that feeling growing up.
Yeah.
So if you had to give somebody a piece of advice, just one thing that if they're in a scarce sort of plane or consciousness right now, and you said, here's something you could do that would help shift that, even if they don't have a lot. So this is the biggest thing. I've been talking about this a lot to different people and different, a mastermind and stuff lately, is this idea that the most important time to be abundant is when things are scarce. And people always want to say, oh, well, it's easy for you to be abundant, you have money. And you go, well, I didn't always.
Right.
And even in having had more and more money, there have been times recently, like with my cabin, where you buy a house and then you're like, I don't have a lot of cash.
Yep.
And then you have to, that's when the scarcity comes back. And then I work twice as hard in those points on the emotional relationship to it, of truly believing that there's so much. And it's like people go, oh, well, it's easy right now because you have money. It's like, no, the most important times to be abundant are when it's hardest.
Right.
That is literally, it's like, I was give this example. I had this girlfriend after college who would be like, oh, this is going on at work and this and this and this. And I was super into like, be positive. And there are times when things were she was just complaining. And she goes, I don't want the positivity stuff right now. Okay. And I go, it seems like this is the best time to be positive. Like, it's easy to be positive when things are good. It's hard to do it when they're not, but that's when it's most important. So for you, if you had to give somebody advice, even if they didn't have a lot, because you could be like, well, what I would recommend is just go rent a jet, go to Belize with your family,
right?
Throw down a quick 6 fig. Who gives a shit? But a lot of people won't be able to do that. I'll probably do it tomorrow just for fun. But
that's one does.
Oh damn, we got that financial workshop tomorrow with Jeff. I would do it, but
Jeff is just such a burden on us.
So yeah, what would you, if you had a piece of advice, in having gone from a more scarcity place to abundance? I think one thing you said that was really important is just understanding that you're never done. Like, even if you're making $100,000 a month and you feel really good about money, at $200 a month, you may start to have some sort of upper limit issues. You may start to feel weird feelings at that point. Like, you're always working through it. Don't think that there's a finishing point. Like you said, it's been gradual.
Yeah. So I think do you have time for a longer story or sure?
Yeah, no, we're good. We've got an extra hour. We're just gonna cut Jeff off. Jeff Sadness, dude. Jeff Stock flew here from Austin, and he's gonna cut my show.
Oh man.
I wanted to be on. Also, he made such a big deal about what he texted me probably 4 times about, can I wear flip-flops and shorts? Is that okay? And then he shows up in his fucking pants and his dress shoes again, just too afraid to. Where is the camera on my shorts? Can I be sitting? I don't know why you said.
I had the
voice
same
is
question.
nothing like this. I'm being way too harsh. Okay, let's hear this story.
Okay, so I think it comes back to trying to understand why you do what you do, and what are the things that are driving you. And so for me, it took me a long time to realize that this fear of being a burden around money, or like a burden on other people, is what's driving my desire to earn. And there's this tendency when you get to that point to go like, oh, well, that's dumb. Like, I'm not a burden on other people, you know? And like, you don't need to, you know, saying to me, like, you don't need to have that fear anymore. And that's not like, for your subconscious, that doesn't work. So there's this idea called the loyal soldier. And so it goes back to World War II. There's one example from World War II. And that is Japan in the battles in the Pacific Islands would send, like, they'd have all these soldiers that they would send in and say, like, fight until the war is over. Like, fight until we tell you to come home. And so they're like, would get cut off from their group, you know, or whatever else, and they would fight for years. And the war has ended, and they're still fighting. And you know, because they've been fighting this guerrilla war. And what happened is, you know, like, over the 5 years or more after World War II ended, you hear these reports of individual groups of Japanese soldiers still fighting.
Who are they fighting though?
American soldiers. There's some in the Philippines, right? So they're you know, fighting like the local groups. They are like sabotaging supply lines, you know, attacking villages.
People are like, what is going on right now? Why don't we have any food?
Yeah. And so what the governments would do is like try to reach them and be like, the war is over, and like, you don't need to fight this anymore.
Yeah.
And they had been told, like, we will not come home until like our commanding officers tell us. And so the Japanese government spent years going in, specifically finding these people and then telling them the war is over. You don't need to fight anymore. All the way through. So to I think this is like 1970. So the war's been over for a really long time.
Yeah, a really long time.
And there's this guy, his name's Hiro Inodo. And
great name.
Yeah, Hiro is HIROO.
Yeah.
But you know,
still
phonetically. And he is in the jungles in the Philippines, and he is still fighting very effectively.
Who's he fighting though? Like, who's fighting? Like, who's in there?
So he's like, imagine a guy living in the jungle, like,
for 25 years.
Yeah, being like, how do I like serve my country and fight this war?
Because he's in foreign territory, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so he's
is he just like killing random people?
Yeah. And so,
like, somebody's just out for a walk. They're like, oh, look, this is this beautiful forest. And he's like, not today. And it's a fucking ending, just killing randos.
Yeah. And so people,
it's not fun. I mean, it's kind of funny, I guess. But
so, like, all of these people have tried to tell him, like, the war's over, man. You don't need to fight this anymore. And so, then so in the early 70s, there's this college student in Japan who hears that there's this rumor, right? There's this guy still out there, this soldier, and he decides that he's going to go find him. And so it takes him quite a while, but he goes and finds Hiro Inodo, and like is able to sit down with him and be like, look, the war is over and all that. And he, at first he won't believe it. And then he kind of believes it. And then he realizes that he's been fighting this war. He has killed tons of people that he should not have killed.
Children, people on walks.
Right? He's been doing exactly what he was told.
Yeah.
And he executed his orders perfectly.
Yeah.
But he's been fighting this war for so long. And so you have this shame and guilt. And there had been, when they the Japanese government, when they brought these other soldiers home, at first they told them like, stop, what are you doing? The war is over. What are you doing? You don't need to do this. And these people could not reintegrate into society,
right?
Because they had taken what they thought was their like highest honor.
Yeah, well, especially because it's a shame-based culture in Japan.
Yeah, and they'd taken it too far. Like they thought they were serving their country the best possible way, and they had gotten to the point where like they'd made all of these mistakes. They had been doing this thing that was no longer necessary. And so when they finally, Hironoto in particular had been told, like his commanding officer had told him, like, I will tell you when you can end, when you can stop fighting. And so they found his commanding officer, who was like working at a bookstore 30 years, 25 years later, whatever, and had him come and convinced him that like, I get emotional thinking about it, but that basically telling him, not that like the war is over, you wasting your effort for 25 years, but saying like coming back and saying thank you for your service and like retiring him in that way.
Right.
And when they brought him back to Japan, they didn't say anything about like your effort is wasted. They said like they gave him a hero's welcome, right? He was the most honorable soldier. And so how this relates to psychology and money is we have all of these things, these battles that we've been fighting. For me, I'm fighting this battle of to not be a burden on anybody. Right. And I've resented a bunch of people in my family who were a burden on my mom, who were in all of that. Like one of my brothers and my stepdad, actually. Like my mom really took care of them. And
to you, that's like the worst thing possible because that was your programming.
Yeah. And so I had this conversation with my mom once, like after my parents divorced, she went back to school. She became a nurse. She got her master's in nursing. And we were on a trip to go visit my sister in Seattle and talking about how I was going. And I realized that my mom said that she had made $100,000 last year as a nurse, like working overtime, taking the holiday shifts that people didn't want and all of that. And I had this realization that she didn't need me to protect her at all, right? She was taking care of all these people in her life, not because they were a burden on her, they were forcing it on her, but because that's who she is. And she'd worked super hard to be able to care for everyone. And I had like deep resentment towards these individuals. And so it's this realization that I'd been fighting this war for years and it had been shaping a lot of my behavior, like this war that had ended years earlier.
Right.
And so sitting in that place, you realize like, on one hand, you can feel all this guilt and shame about like, playing through interactions, how I interacted with my brother, how I resented my stepdad, all of those things. And you can only get through that when you think about the loyal soldier and say, there's this like soldier inside of you who's been fighting this battle that's been over for a long time. And not by putting that to an end with shame or guilt,
right,
but by saying, like, how that served me. I would only have a $200 million a year company because that soldier inside of me didn't want to be a burden on other people,
right,
and fought that battle for so long and learned all the possible skills and everything else.
Right.
And so now to say, you're not needed anymore. You fought the war. That war is over. You can stop, let go of that. Here's your parade. Here's your hero's welcome. Retire with honor. And that changes everything in your relationship with money when you realize that what was driving you, how that served you, and then when you can let it go.
Well, first off, thank you for sharing that. It's it's so many people, especially in like our space, it's like shame based and guilt based, and it's like, you're a little bitch, like don't do that, don't sleep, don't do these things. And like I think what you just said is really profound, because it's having gratitude for that person, but it doesn't mean you have to keep fighting that war. Right? Like there are people who are just carrying around their own burdens, whether it's feeling like a burden or whatever it might be, but thinking that they have to, and then feeling ashamed of all the done. But like you said, that shift. I think there's actually an episode in Archer, if you've ever seen that, with Hero, who's like, he's there he's in the jungle, and they're like, dude, it's over, and he's like, no, and then they're like friends, but that it seems like for you, and I think for so many people, there's some war that they're fighting, but approaching it from that shift of like, thank you for your service. Like, it's not saying, because there's no reason to regret any of those things. Like you said, you wouldn't be. It's like when I got mugged when I was 15, like I would never ever trade that moment. Like those 2 minutes were literally like the most defining moments of my life. I am who I am because of that. And if you take any little piece out, you're not the person you are. But having gratitude, I used to do this exercise with people. It was like post-traumatic gratitude. And so I would take people through like a traumatic experience they had and have them, and I did this for myself with my mugging like 4 different times, where I went through it and I saw it from my eyes, and then I saw it from a secondary view, and then I saw it from a different angle. And so I'd go into this, theater of my mind, and I would relive it. And then I realized what pissed me off most about it was that they didn't even hold the knife to my neck, that they didn't even respect me enough to do that, that they just tapped it on the sign. And I was like, wow, it was continuing to go through it, but it turned from this, horrible situation into this thing that I was deeply grateful for. And hearing you talk about like, I think there's so many people that don't feel that way about how they've been in the past. And that's huge. Yeah. So I think the lesson here is deal with your deep emotional stuff and work through it. I heard Andrew Huberman say the other day, there's no therapeutic practices where they tell you to avoid the thing that's messing with you. Like all therapies are based on getting closer to the trauma. And I think so many people just want to avoid it. And so it's like, confront the feelings. Don't avoid them. Like by being scarce about money, just trying to make more, it's a solution, but it's not actually going to solve. It's like using a weed whacker instead of going to the root. Yep. They're just going to grow back. Yep. So it's a good way to put it. Damn, that story's great. And thank you for sharing that. I don't think I've ever told that on I don't know that I've ever told that on a recording before. Yeah. So well, thank you. And that's our first, that'll be the first tears. And I've cried on so many stages. Like I 100% understand. Every time I try to tell the story about my dog when I'm speaking, I'm done. And that's how you know you're sharing stories worth telling. Yeah, exactly. If they scare you, it's the right ones. So we'll finish up. We'll change gears then. Convertkit. Yeah. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it? Just because, I mean, I'm trying to like be sold enough to just, the biggest pain point for me is the switch. Yep. Right. But I'm almost excited about the idea of us being able to clean up our stuff. Because we have so many automations that are running that like somebody be like, this link doesn't work. I'm like, yeah, that's because it's from 4 years ago. How the fuck did you get this email? Right. And there's like some random automation that's running from forever ago. My biggest fear is the engagement tagging and being able to send the right people that have, based on opens and stuff. I know you have like a star strategy. I'd be switching from Active Campaign, which is the first one that I finally, like 2 years ago, was like, I'll promote this because I figured out how to do engagement tagging. Was like, this is good enough that I feel happy to do it, but I also don't know anybody at Active Campaign. Right. You can just drive we live really close to each other, and also because we've realized that we've had this conversation, Cam and I, quite a bit of, are we an email company that teaches money stuff, or are we a money company that teaches email? And we're a money company that teaches email. Like I have these 3 phases through the almost passive income roadmap, and the second phase is learning an exponential income skill, and one we teach is email. And then the best asset we teach people to build is an email list. Right. So I'd rather have a close relationship with an ESP where I can say to people, hey, go sign up for Convertkit, use my affiliate link, you'll get these templates and this stuff, where we can really be. Oh, and Franny said I switched to Convertkit last year and it's been the best decision. We'll wait till I get my affiliate link and then you guys should switch. No. But yeah, what would you say, what's the best, what is the number one reason to use that over something else? Yeah. So Convertkit's the system that I wanted to exist, right? So I was using MailChimp, and I sold, I don't know, 100 grand worth of digital products or so.
through email, like with hacked together systems. And it was like, okay, how do I get to a system that work, like it has the best practices by default. So that's been like what we created in Convertkit is the best practices built in by default. It's for the people who want to have like a lot of reach and scale, but have it be simple so they don't have to hire out like a whole team.
Yeah.
Or you think about Tim Ferriss, he has the marketing reach of like a full magazine, or a big publication that would have 10, 15 people, all that. But it's just him and his assistant. That's it. And they've reached millions of people.
Yep.
So like just dialing in, it's not gonna be the most complicated platform, but dialing in the things you need at scale, right? So deliverability, automation, all of that. So you get into the weeds of like, oh, maybe there's some little advanced detailed thing that isn't possible. But instead of spending, 50 hours a month in your email tool, you'll spend 10. So that's the thing. We're serving all of these creators. And it's like, hey, we want you to build automations and to build out Convertkit and then get back to like creating, whether it's writing or comedy or music or any of those things. Like that's what you should be doing, not like in the depths of your email tool.
Right.
We're actually running, this is funny you're talking about the like all the complexities, because we focus everything on getting like new people start with Convertkit, but we focus a lot on getting people to switch. And so the campaign that we're running this summer is called the Fresh Start campaign. And it's all about like basically saying you've got, 5 years of complexity in a tool, and like we'll help you migrate over your list and all
the
that.
80-20 of like
but get a
the
fresh
stuff you
start
need.
in it. Yeah. Because your business has changed so much.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it's the same. We've got stuff, it's 4 or 5 years of that list. Also, we have all these contacts where Cam and I are like hitting up support. Like, who are these fucking people? Why do we have 90,000 contacts, but we're sending to 25,000 every day? Like, where are they? What are these? Where do they come from? How have these people never opened? What are we supposed like? Just but I am on their best sending pool, so I'm gonna have to. I don't know if you know anybody who works at Convertkit, but I need to make sure that I get in the right IP pool so that I'm
and that's the thing. Through. Like all these companies, Active Campaign's probably 3 or 4 times our size. But I think because they're focusing on a broad range of industries, and then they're just a lot bigger, they're not able to put that same level of effort into each customer migration.
Yeah.
And so we do like custom warm-up plans and all that stuff. Like there's a creator named Sahil Bloom who just switched over to us from Substack, brought over 100,000 subscribers, and like we put together a full plan for him of like, okay, this is how we're going to start with some automated emails to warm up engagement and make sure you're on the right IP pool.
Yeah. One, most people don't know what they're doing when it comes to deliverability at all. So that's super helpful.
Yeah.
Especially creators. It's not like if you should start getting the big comedians. Maybe I can help with that as I become one.
Yes, exactly.
But like, it's like if Bert Kreischer was, my email is, he couldn't, zero part of him is going to be like, oh, you want deliverability. Let's figure that out. Like,
yeah, people don't even know what deliverability is.
No, they don't even know there is that. They're like, I send the email. Right. It goes to people, right? And you're like, well, actually.
Probably one of the biggest things actually that makes a difference in deliverability is who you say no to.
Yeah.
So there's a ton of people like coming from Infusionsoft or Keep, or Maripost or some of these other tools that are heavy in direct response marketing and have shit deliverability as a result of that. And so like by focusing on the content creators, people that you really want to get emails from, then
people are like, well, I can't use Convertkit because they won't let me send these offers. And I'm like, well, the offers you're sending are shitty. Like that's probably a good reason.
Yeah, if you have an engaged list and and you're sending high quality offers, then like absolutely.
Yeah. Do you guys ban people if they're sending bad offers?
Oh, absolutely.
And what does that look like? What is the criteria for that?
I mean, it's more
it just blanket like these things aren't okay, or is it like
there are some of those that like Gmail and Yahoo and others, the inbox providers, like day trading kind of stuff, certain not crypto stuff, but like remember when ICOs were a huge thing, like the initial coin offerings a few years ago, and people were doing like all kinds of shady stuff there. Like there's a lot of that would just end up in spam if you sent it. And so there's those categories that we stay away from.
So you're doing it more to protect the IPs, not to like, like judging. It's like
it's not a values
it's
judgment.
Not a political statement type thing. You're not like, oh, this person believe we don't allow this person to say these things.
Yeah. It's that as a whole, the reputation is from the whole community that's sending on Convertkit.
Right.
And so you want your community to be James Clear, Pat Flynn,
right? Because those people are the engagement's going to be
Yep.
super high naturally because they're well liked by their audience.
Yeah, and so we have a 5-person team that all they do is spam compliance and anti-fraud stuff. Like there's 3 engineers on that team and then 2 like deliverability experts. And so they like if something comes up that like triggers a rule, they're the ones that would reach out and talk to the team and say, hey, is this the kind of content that you always send? Is that
right.
sort of thing.
So you're not going to just
No.
get rid of them. You'd be like, hey, if you are going to keep sending this, you got to change. Like, you're not going to be able to stay on this platform.
Yeah.
You're not just going to say, hey, go screw yourself. Yeah. You're done.
Yeah. Because right,
that does
creators.
happen at certain places. I know that they'll just do that.
Yeah. Well, and what we hate is I had this with a random Instagram account that I was running actually for one of my Airbnbs, and Instagram just deleted it. Can't recover it. It's locked forever. There's no one to get a hold of. And it's like, okay. No, the reason that we do email is that you own
the asset. That's the most powerful part of email.
Yeah. And so making sure that if you're not a good fit for Convertkit, that you have time to
would let them download the list and stuff.
Yeah,
and
100%.
That's actually a huge deal.
Yeah. And then really we're just focused on like creators who are sending great content and are.
Well, I know it's turned down on a lot of people, but I remember when because Convertkit kind of been that big when we had dinner in Austin that time.
Yeah. It was that 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So but I remember we talked about it and I was like, that was when Maripost, I think, was starting to come around and all the marketers started going to Maripost, all the real direct response heavy people. Yep. And it was like, oh, well, they're going to, the problem is when a bunch of marketers go somewhere, then it ruins the whole thing. And so I know you were kind of stubborn about that, but obviously it's paid off and maybe slower than it could have, because you could have gotten a lot of the, DR heavy people who would like want it off of Aweber, or,
The biggest thing is like on a mindset thing is, do you think of your audience as
Are you guys still getting good sound or no? They're saying there's some, I think you might have to get a little closer to the mic. Is
this better? Here we go.
Does that sound better?
So let's see, what was that thought? It's like how you think of the relationship to your audience. Is it an ATM machine that you can hit some buttons and pull cash out and that's all you care about? Or is this a group of people that you're trying to make their lives better? You're trying to serve them. You're trying, who are getting real value.
Is your list just data and numbers to you, or are they real humans that you're serving?
And if you think of them as real humans that you're serving, and the byproduct of your service of those people is that you make tens or hundreds or thousands of dollars a year, like that, amazing. That is a great fit. And if you think of it like, I got these leads and it's just how much money can I squeeze out of them before they unsubscribe? Then
that's probably
please do that somewhere else.
Go somewhere else.
So
that's awesome. Cool. Well, let's we'll wrap.
Sounds good.
Super fun. I think we're gonna have to just start a podcast because this is so much fun. I'm like, this is just such a great way of doing this stuff that it's different than even if we're on stage.
Right.
There's more of a pressure with like the audience and things. So it's just fun to sit and have real conversations and talk about the loyal soldier. It's a great story. Thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable and all that, and
absolutely
letting me joke in between it. I do know because there are people who don't know how to like sometimes there's a good joke, but it's not worth you've got to let that experience. I know enough to do that, and I had a business with a therapist for 2 years. We dealt with people saying, well, you got to be like just holding space,
right?
But there are times where there's certain funny people that they don't know, and they're like, oh, there's a joke right here. Wait. But it is kind of funny to think about that dude just out there. There's just some kid with the stuffed animal, and he's like, she will be dead. Just sniping.
And here we are. That's what we're
gonna end on. Now we're back. There. Okay, so how can people find Nathan Barry? They're gonna go to nathanbarry.com. That's Barry with a B-A-Y.
Yep.
.com. Definitely read I know some people linked to the article in here already on the Zoom here, but definitely go read the Ladders of Wealth. And then I haven't read the other one yet, but
the $1 billion
creator is
those are really kind of the two flagship pieces.
Okay.
The $1 billion creator just asked the question of, if you have an audience that you can point you have attention that you can point at anything. What is the highest ROI place that you could point that attention? And then it just explores that.
That's so much of what I literally all the like the call me maybe calls. A lot of the time I'm just literally being like, hey, do less stuff.
Yeah.
Do less shit better. Just stop doing all these things.
Yep.
What is the one thing that would truly change everything? And they're like, well, I have these 6 business ideas. And I'm like, first off, they're bad. Second, don't do all that.
Yeah.
So go read that stuff. Somebody already linked that in again. And then convertkit.com.
Yeah, convertkit.com.
If you want to,
you go convertkit.com/fresh start if you want.
Fresh start.
If you want to migrate, we'll do the whole migration for you for free.
All right, we gotta gotta figure this out. All right, guys, thank you so much. Thank you, Nathan.
Thanks.
And we're gonna take a little break here. Let's ask the question to get you $100. And then we'll wrap and we'll be back. Let's say the only thing is we could even go. We'll figure this out in a minute. Let's ask the question. What? Everybody, get ready to type for your $100. What is the name of the neighborhood where you motherfucker? Jesus, Tipper! Wow. Holy Lord, Tipper, you have deserved one this whole time. He's been second like twice out of the just barely missing. You guys are like,
Franny was pretty close.
I feel like you guys are yeah. Franny was right there, but it's funny that you guys are like, I feel like you guys are now listening, thinking, "What's the question he's going to ask?" But that is a point. I want you guys paying attention.
There you go
to the little things. But the funny thing is, Tipper lives in England, and so the fact that he's just like,
"Oh, well, there's French."
He also has the most remarkable voice. Also, Tipper, I didn't tell you this. That video you guys did was one of the best things ever. For my birthday, there's the song like "My Money Don't Jiggle Jiggle."
Yeah,
whatever. His voice is that, like, just like that. So on my birthday, I wake up to a message from, I think it's from Connor, who they had gotten Tipper to stand in front of a green screen and record that song, and it was incredible. And Tipper, you killed it. Unbelievable. Well played. Oh wait, our sound's not on, so we can't hear. Go ahead.
I was going to say Tipper has to jump in and say hi, so everyone.
Tipper, just so that Nathan can hear this voice.
Oh no, I can't hear him.
Yeah.
Tell us that your money doesn't jiggle jiggle.
His audio is not coming through. He's talking.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. All
right. Well, that's it for now, guys. Then I'll turn my sound off so I don't get this echo. Thank you. Let's say, Jeff, yours is a full hour, right? Why don't we do yours after Liz? That'll be the finale.